Deep within the vast wilderness of Montana, where pine forests stretch endlessly and the mountains loom like silent guardians. By day, these cabins seem peaceful. Smoke curls gently from chimneys. Wooden porches creak softly in the breeze. But when night falls, the forest changes. The wind begins to whisper through the trees. Footsteps echo where no path exists. Cabin doors tremble as if something outside is testing their strength. Locals say the forests of Montana remember every scream, every disappearance, and every soul that wandered too far from the light. Some cabins were built on cursed ground. Some were abandoned after unexplainable events. And some are still standing, waiting. Visitors who stay the night report shadows moving between trees, knocks on windows with no one outside, and voices calling from the darkness just beyond the firelight. Tonight, we journey deep into the haunted forests of Montana to uncover the most terrifying cabins hidden among the trees, places where isolation becomes a doorway to fear. If you were alone in a cabin and heard footsteps circling it in the middle of the night, would you open the door to look, or would you pray the darkness passed you by? Hello, my dear friend. I hope you are warm and safe, because the forests we are about to explore are cold, unforgiving, and alive with secrets. Montana is known for its untouched wilderness, its silence, and its raw beauty. But beneath that beauty lies a history of vanished settlers, lost hunters, broken promises, and land soaked with sorrow. Many cabins were built by people seeking solitude or survival. Others were used as hunting lodges, ranger shelters, or hideaways. Over time, some were abandoned after strange events that no one could explain. Visitors speak of cabins that feel watched. Of fireplaces that go cold without reason. Of doors that lock themselves from the inside. The forest does not forget those who enter it. Before we step deeper between the trees, let me ask you something. If you were staying alone in a forest cabin and heard someone calling your name from outside at midnight, would you answer, or would you stay silent and hope it was not meant for you? Whisper Pine Cabin stands alone beneath towering pines, hidden far from marked roads and nearby towns. The forest here grows dense and tall, its canopy blocking much of the sky even during the day. Sunlight filters down in narrow beams, leaving the ground cool and shadowed. The cabin itself is small and weathered, built from dark wood that blends naturally with the surrounding trees. By daylight, it feels quiet and remote, a place meant for solitude rather than comfort. The forest never truly feels empty. Wind moves softly through the upper branches, producing a low, steady sound that resembles distant breath. Pine needles carpet the ground, muffling footsteps and absorbing noise. Guests who arrive often remark on how quickly the outside world seems to fade, replaced by stillness and isolation. The light thins between the trees, and the forest darkens earlier than expected. Shadows gather around the cabin walls, stretching and overlapping until the structure feels enclosed. Birds retreat into silence, and even insects seem hesitant to fill the air with sound. The quiet becomes heavy, pressing inward rather than opening outward. It is after sunset that the whispers begin. At first, they are faint. Soft murmurs drift through the cabin, easily mistaken for the wind slipping through cracks in the wood. Guests pause, listening, trying to identify the source. The sounds do not come from outside. They emerge from within the walls themselves, rising gently through the wood as if the cabin is breathing. As the night deepens, the whispers grow clearer. They remain low and calm, never sharp or sudden. They move along the walls, shifting from room to room. Sometimes they gather near corners or door frames, where the wood meets and settles. The voices do not speak in full sentences. They murmur fragments, tones, and rhythms that feel intentional without forming clear meaning. Near midnight, the whispers become harder to ignore. Guests describe the sensation of being surrounded by sound, as if the cabin interior has filled with quiet voices layered over one another. The walls seem to carry the noise upward and across the ceiling, surrounding the listener. Despite the intensity, the voices never rise to shouting. They remain soft, controlled, and persistent. Some visitors report a more unsettling detail. They claim the whispers begin to repeat their thoughts aloud. A passing idea, unspoken, seems to echo back through the wood moments later. The repetition is subtle, not exact, but close enough to feel deliberate. The cabin does not respond immediately. It listens first. Then it answers. Those who experience this describe a sudden awareness of their own minds. Thoughts slow. Breathing becomes measured. Fear does not arrive all at once. Instead, curiosity lingers, mixed with unease. The sense of being observed grows stronger, though no presence is ever seen. Sleep is difficult inside Whisper Pine Cabin. Some guests lie awake, listening to the walls murmur through the night. Others drift into shallow rest, only to wake repeatedly as the whispers shift location. Dreams become vivid and disjointed, filled with forest imagery and the feeling of being followed without footsteps. By the hours before dawn, many choose to leave. Those who depart early describe a sharp change the moment they step outside. The forest no longer feels passive. Branches snap behind them without warning. Twigs crack underfoot even when stepping carefully. The wind moves erratically, pushing through the trees in sudden bursts. As they walk away from the cabin, the sense of being watched intensifies. The forest feels crowded, though no shapes are visible. Sounds follow closely, always just behind, never quite catching up. Those who flee do not stop until they reach open ground or their vehicles, hearts racing and breath unsteady. Once clear of the forest, the feeling fades quickly. The whispers do not follow. The sounds of snapping branches fall silent. Only memory remains, sharp and lingering. Stories about Whisper Pine Cabin have circulated quietly among locals for years. The cabin is rarely advertised and often booked by word of mouth. Those who know its reputation warn visitors not to stay past midnight and never to leave in a panic. Calm, they say, is the only thing the forest respects. Natural explanations are often offered. Pine forests are known for their acoustics. Wind traveling through hollow trunks and layered branches can create whispering sounds that seem to move and respond. Old cabins expand and contract as temperatures change, causing wood to creak and carry sound unpredictably. The human mind, isolated and alert in darkness, can amplify internal thoughts until they feel external. Yet these explanations fail to satisfy those who have stayed the night. The whispers are too precise. The timing too deliberate. The repetition of thoughts too personal. And the forest response to sudden departure feels purposeful, as if the land itself resents being abandoned before the night is complete. Some believe the cabin was built in a place where the forest listens more closely. A place where sound, thought, and memory intertwine. Over time, the wood may have absorbed more than just wind and weather. It may have learned patterns. It may have learned people. By morning, Whisper Pine Cabin appears unchanged. Sunlight filters through the trees once more. The forest stands calm and unmoving. The cabin walls are silent, offering no hint of the voices carried through them hours earlier. Birds return, and the wind resumes its gentle flow. A heightened awareness of their own thoughts. A lingering sense that silence is never truly empty. And the memory of a cabin that seemed to listen, waiting patiently for night to fall again. When the whispers would return and the forest would lean closer, ready to hear what its guests were thinking next. Black Elk Hollow Cabin sits alone in a narrow clearing, surrounded by tall trees that crowd close as if guarding a secret. surrounded by tall trees that crowd close as if guarding a secret. Even in the height of summer, the air here feels wrong. Even in the height of summer, the air here feels wrong. Warm sunlight reaches the roof and walls, yet the space around the cabin holds a persistent chill. Warm sunlight reaches the roof and walls, yet the space around the cabin holds a persistent chill. Visitors often pause before stepping inside, pulling their jackets tighter, surprised by cold that has no clear source. During the day, the clearing appears quiet and still. Birds keep their distance, and the wind moves carefully through the branches, never lingering. The cabin itself looks ordinary enough, built of aged wood and stone, resting on ground worn smooth by time. But the cold remains, settling into skin and breath, as though the hollow is cut off from the seasons around it. As evening approaches, the temperature drops further. Shadows stretch quickly across the clearing, and the trees seem to lean inward, narrowing the open space. The cabin windows darken, reflecting the forest rather than revealing the interior. Visitors light lamps and prepare for the night, already aware that something about this place refuses comfort. After full darkness settles, the footsteps begin. They are heavy and deliberate, pressing into the earth with slow, measured force. The sound circles the cabin steadily, never rushing, never dragging. Each step feels close enough to count, moving along the walls, pausing briefly near doors and windows before continuing on its path. The footsteps do not scrape or stumble. They carry weight, suggesting height and strength, yet reveal no shape. Those inside listen in silence, unsure whether the sound belongs to a person, an animal, or something that should not be there at all. The rhythm remains calm, almost patient, as if the walker has all the time it needs. The moment lights are turned on, the footsteps stop. Silence falls suddenly, sharp and complete. The clearing outside becomes still, broken only by distant night sounds. Visitors rush to windows, peering into darkness that shows nothing but trees and empty ground. No movement. No retreating sound. Just the absence where something had been moments before. When lights are dimmed or turned off, the footsteps return. They resume exactly where they left off, as if the interruption never happened. The circle continues, one slow pass after another, maintaining the same distance from the cabin. The control behind the timing unsettles those listening, making it clear that the presence is aware of their actions. Sleep comes in fragments. Those who manage to rest often wake suddenly, heart racing, convinced they are being watched. The cold deepens during these hours, seeping through blankets and walls. Breath fogs faintly in the air, even though summer warmth should still linger outside. Near the edge of the clearing, beyond the reach of cabin light, a shape appears. It stands tall and unmoving, just beyond the tree line. At first, it looks like a trick of shadow, a cluster of trunks blending together. But the longer it is observed, the clearer its outline becomes. The form does not sway with the wind. It does not shift with the moonlight. It simply stands. Watching. The figure never steps into the clearing. It remains at the boundary, where forest meets open space, maintaining a respectful distance. Its height is difficult to judge, but it appears taller than any person nearby. No features are visible. The darkness around it seems thicker, absorbing light rather than reflecting it. Visitors who notice the figure feel a quiet pressure settle over them. Fear does not strike suddenly. Instead, awareness grows slowly, filling the space between thoughts. The sense of being observed becomes constant, unblinking, as though the figure has fixed its attention on the cabin itself rather than the people inside. When the heavy steps circle the cabin, the tree line remains empty. When the steps stop, the tall shadow stands in silence. This separation feels intentional, as if different roles are being played, each waiting its turn. As the night stretches toward morning, the figure remains. It does not approach. It does not retreat. It stands through the long hours, patient and unmoved by passing time. Those who keep watch notice that it fades slightly as dawn nears, blending more easily into the trees as light returns to the clearing. By sunrise, the figure is gone. The forest looks ordinary again. The cold begins to lift, though it never disappears completely. The cabin returns to stillness, offering no sign of the night before. Footprints are absent. The ground shows no disturbance. Only the memory of sound and shadow remains. Visitors speak of the experience quietly. Some question their senses, searching for logical explanations. Others accept that the hollow holds something beyond easy understanding. What unsettles them most is not what they saw or heard, but how deliberate it all felt. The timing. The patience. The restraint. Black Elk Hollow Cabin does not threaten. It observes. The cold that settles even in summer, the footsteps that circle without entering, and the tall shadow that watches until morning all suggest a presence bound to the land itself. Something that has stood here long before the cabin was built, measuring time differently, guarding a space that does not belong to passing visitors. Those who leave carry the experience with them. Long after they return to warmth and light, they recall the sound of heavy steps stopping at the flick of a switch, and the image of a tall shape standing just beyond reach. And the forest watches back. And the cabin, cold and silent, remains where it is, waiting for night to fall again. Ravenwood Watch Cabin sits deep within a dense stretch of forest, far from paved roads and steady noise. Tall trees crowd close on all sides, their branches overlapping to form a ceiling that dims the light even during the day. The cabin itself is modest, built of dark timber that blends easily into the surroundings, as if it was meant to be overlooked rather than noticed. By daylight, the place feels quiet but not threatening. Wind moves through leaves in slow waves. The forest breathes evenly. Ravens appear only in passing, gliding between trees or calling from distant perches. Guests often remark on the stillness, the sense of being removed from the world without being entirely alone. That feeling changes when night arrives. As dusk settles, black shapes begin to gather above the cabin. Ravens land one by one along the roofline, their feathers absorbing the last light of the sky. They arrive without chaos, spacing themselves evenly, facing outward as if watching the forest rather than one another. Within minutes, the roof is crowded with dark forms. Their calls begin shortly after. The sound carries farther than expected, echoing through the trees in long, repeating patterns. Each call seems to linger, bouncing between trunks and returning from multiple directions at once. It becomes difficult to tell how many birds are present. The forest amplifies the noise, stretching it into something that feels endless. As the night deepens, movement begins above. Guests wake to scratching sounds on the roof, slow and deliberate. Talons scrape against wood in uneven rhythms. The sounds travel overhead, shifting from one side of the cabin to the other, as if the birds are pacing. There is no frantic flapping, no sudden bursts of motion. Only steady contact, repeated again and again. Those who lie awake describe the sensation of being listened to. The scratching seems to pause when movement occurs inside the cabin, then resume once stillness returns. The ravens do not leave. They remain until the early hours, their presence constant. Sleep comes in fragments. Dreams are shallow and unsettled, often filled with dark shapes and the sense of being watched from above. When morning finally arrives, the forest grows quiet again. The calls stop abruptly, as if on command. The roof is empty. Outside, feathers lie scattered across the porch and surrounding ground. They are large, glossy, and unmistakably black. Some rest gently against the door. Others are caught in the grain of the wooden steps. No signs of struggle appear. The feathers seem placed rather than dropped. The pattern repeats every night. Ravens arrive at dusk. Calls echo through the forest. Scratching follows after dark. Feathers appear by morning. The behavior does not vary with weather or season. Rain does not deter the birds. Wind does not scatter them. They never perch in the trees around the cabin. They do not approach food or light. Their attention remains fixed on the structure itself, and more specifically, on the ground beneath it. Local stories offer an explanation passed quietly between longtime residents. The land beneath the cabin was once used for purposes never fully recorded. Something was buried there, intentionally and deeply. What it was has faded from memory, but the belief remains that it was not meant to be disturbed. According to these stories, the ravens are not drawn to the cabin, but to what lies below it. They are said to be watchers rather than visitors, guardians tasked with marking the boundary between what should remain hidden and what walks freely above. Some guests report feeling an unusual pressure inside the cabin, strongest near the center of the floor. A subtle sense of weight, as though the ground beneath is denser there. Others describe hearing faint tapping sounds from below during the night, separate from the scratching above, too soft to identify clearly. No one has ever uncovered proof of what may be buried beneath Ravenwood Watch cabin. Attempts to investigate have been discouraged, often abandoned after equipment malfunctions or unexplained accidents nearby. The forest seems resistant to intrusion, paths growing over quickly, tools breaking without clear cause. The ravens never interfere directly. They do not attack. They do not approach people. Their role appears limited to observation and warning. Their calls fill the forest, announcing presence rather than threat. Those who stay at the cabin for multiple nights often report a growing sense of being tolerated rather than welcomed. The ravens continue their vigil, unchanged by human presence. It feels as though the cabin exists on borrowed time each night, allowed to remain undisturbed so long as what lies beneath remains untouched. By day, the forest resumes its calm rhythm. The cabin stands quiet and unremarkable. Only the scattered feathers hint at the activity that comes with darkness. Ravenwood Watch cabin endures as a place of uneasy balance. Above, the ravens gather faithfully, their calls marking the passing hours of night. Below, something unseen remains at rest, held in place by soil, time, and vigilance. Guests who leave often carry the memory with them. The sound of wings settling on the roof. The endless echo of calls through the trees. The scratching overhead that felt measured and intentional. Whether the ravens are guardians, witnesses, or reminders, their presence is undeniable. They watch every night, ensuring that whatever lies buried beneath the cabin remains exactly where it belongs. Timberline Lost Cabin exists in a strange space between certainty and absence. It appears clearly on maps, marked with a small square and a name, placed among winding trails and dense forest lines. Coordinates align. Distances calculate correctly. Yet those who attempt to reach it during daylight return confused, retracing their steps again and again through familiar terrain that never leads where it should. By day, the forest feels ordinary. Tall trees rise in quiet rows. Sunlight filters through branches, casting steady patterns across the ground. Trails are visible, worn by years of hikers and wildlife. Compasses behave normally. Landmarks match what maps promise. And yet, somewhere within this clarity, the cabin remains unreachable. Searchers pass the same rocks, the same fallen logs, the same bends in the trail, each time believing they are closer than before. The path subtly redirects. Angles feel slightly off. Distances stretch. Hours pass without progress. Eventually, most give up, convinced they missed a turn or misread the map. Darkness settles quickly beneath the canopy, thick and enclosing. Sounds travel farther, carried through cold air. It is during these hours that faint lantern light is sometimes seen deep among the trees. A small, steady glow. Warm in color. Never flickering wildly. It appears stationary at first. Then shifts slowly. As if waiting to be noticed. Those who see the light often stop moving. The glow does not behave like a reflection or a distant campsite. It holds its shape. It feels intentional. A guide rather than a signal. Against instinct, many follow it, stepping off marked trails and into uneven ground, trusting the light more than their instruments. The forest seems to open for them. Branches part more easily. Underbrush thins. The air grows quieter, muffled, as though sound itself is being absorbed. Time becomes difficult to judge. Minutes blur into something longer. The lantern remains just ahead, never too far, never close enough to touch. Eventually, the cabin appears. It stands in a small clearing, built of dark timber that blends into shadow. The structure looks intact but old, its edges softened by age. A single lantern hangs near the entrance, matching the glow that led the way. Windows reflect nothing. Smoke does not rise. The door is closed. Those who reach the cabin describe a deep sense of relief. Not happiness, but completion. As if a long effort has finally ended. The forest behind them feels distant and unimportant. The cabin becomes the only solid point in the world. What happens inside is unclear. People remember stepping across the threshold. They recall the smell of old wood and cold air. Some remember sitting down. Others remember standing still. Beyond that, memory breaks apart. There are no clear images. No sounds. No conversations. Just an absence where experience should be. Hours later, they emerge from the forest alone. They stumble out onto trails they do not recognize, often far from where they entered. Dawn is sometimes breaking. Sometimes full night remains. Their bodies are tired, but uninjured. Their belongings are intact. Watches show long gaps of missing time. When asked what happened inside the cabin, they cannot say. There is no fear in their voices, only confusion. Attempts to remember bring headaches and dizziness. The memory resists recovery, sliding away the moment it is approached too closely. Even dreams offer no clarity. Sleep passes without images. Strangely, many report losing all sense of direction after leaving the cabin. For hours, sometimes longer, they struggle to orient themselves even in familiar places. North and south feel meaningless. Paths twist unexpectedly. Only after distance grows between them and the forest does normal awareness return. Search teams have attempted to locate the cabin. They follow the same maps. They visit the same coordinates. They document every turn. During daylight, they find nothing but trees and uneven ground. At night, some report seeing the lantern light, but it never appears in the same place twice. Approaches fail. Equipment malfunctions. Batteries drain without explanation. The forest itself seems unchanged. No clearing remains. No footprints linger. No signs of a structure exist where the cabin should stand. It leaves no physical trace, only stories and missing time. Some say it is not meant to be found by those who look directly for it. Others believe it appears only when the forest chooses to reveal it. A few suggest the cabin is less a place and more a pause, a moment where movement stops and direction dissolves. Animals behave differently near the mapped location. Birds avoid the area at dusk. Deer paths curve away. Insects fall silent earlier than elsewhere. The forest feels watchful, not threatening, but attentive, as if tracking those who move through it. Despite warnings, curiosity continues to draw people in. The certainty of a marked location is difficult to ignore. The idea that something can exist on paper but not in daylight unsettles those who rely on maps and measures. Some return again and again, hoping for clarity, hoping to remember. None ever do. The cabin remains lost, yet never gone. Seen but not held. Reached but not understood. As night settles over the timberline and the forest grows quiet, a lantern may glow once more between the trees. Soft. Steady. Waiting. Those who follow it may find the cabin at last. And those who leave will carry nothing back with them but empty hours, broken direction, and the quiet certainty that something in the woods knows how to be found, and how to remain forever unknown. Cold Creek Trapper Cabin stands where the forest thins and winter never seems to fully leave. A frozen stream runs nearby, its surface locked in pale silence for much of the year. The cabin itself is small and weathered, built from thick logs darkened by age and smoke. It was once a working shelter, a place where trappers waited out storms and tended fires through long, punishing nights. By daylight, the cabin feels sturdy and practical. The walls hold warmth surprisingly well. The hearth dominates the main room, its stones smooth from decades of use. Outside, the creek glints faintly beneath ice, and the surrounding trees lean inward as if to block the wind. Everything about the place suggests endurance rather than comfort. When night arrives, the cabin changes its character. As the fire settles into embers and the forest darkens beyond the windows, a faint metallic clank echoes from near the fireplace. Slow and irregular, like tools brushing against one another. The sound carries weight, heavy and deliberate, never sharp enough to startle, but persistent enough to demand attention. Bootsteps often follow. They move across the wooden floor with measured pace, stopping near the hearth, then shifting again as if someone is testing their footing. The boards creak softly, the same way they do under real weight. Yet no shadows cross the walls. No door opens. The fire burns steadily, unchanged. Those who sit quietly and listen often describe a strange sense of order in the sounds. The clanking never becomes frantic. The steps never rush. Everything follows a rhythm, as if a familiar routine is being repeated with care. Later in the night, frost begins to creep across the inside of the windows. At first it appears as ordinary crystalline patterns, delicate and branching. Then shapes form within the frost, rounded and unmistakable. Handprints press outward from the glass, fingers splayed, palms clear. They do not scrape or slide. They simply appear, then slowly fade as warmth shifts within the room. The handprints are often found in pairs, placed at different heights, as though someone stood close to the window and leaned forward to look outside. No breath fogs the glass. No movement accompanies them. By morning, the frost is gone, leaving the panes clear and unmarked. Sleep in the cabin comes unevenly. Guests wake to subtle changes rather than sudden shocks. The quiet settling of wood. The sense that something has been completed while they rested. Many rise at dawn to find the firewood stacked neatly beside the hearth, logs aligned carefully, bark facing outward, kindling placed on top. No one recalls touching the wood. Supplies left scattered the night before are arranged with intention. Tools sit closer to the fire than where they were left. The changes are practical, thoughtful, and oddly considerate, as though someone anticipated the needs of the next cold night. The cabin does not feel hostile. Despite the sounds and signs, there is no sense of intrusion or threat. The atmosphere carries a quiet vigilance, like a presence that watches over the space rather than claiming it. Those who spend time there often describe feeling protected, especially during storms when wind howls through the trees and snow presses against the walls. Trappers pass through season after season, relying on the shelter to survive isolation and cold. Fires were kept burning. Gear was maintained meticulously. Wood was always stacked, tools always returned to their places. The habits mattered. In a place where mistakes could be fatal, routine became survival. Order meant warmth. Preparation meant life. Some believe those habits never left the cabin, embedded into the space as deeply as smoke into timber. When guests acknowledge the sounds aloud, the activity often lessens. The clanking grows softer. The footsteps pause. The cabin seems to settle, as though reassured that its efforts have been noticed. Ignoring the signs does not provoke them, but listening respectfully appears to calm the space. The frozen creek outside never breaks its silence. Moonlight glows faintly across the ice, reflecting the cabina's windows like dull mirrors. On especially cold nights, guests report seeing shapes move across the creek's surface, distortions in light that vanish when focused on directly. Morning always restores a sense of normalcy. The forest wakes. Frost loosens its grip. Smoke rises cleanly from the chimney. Inside, the cabin looks exactly as it should, except for the careful order that no one remembers creating. The firewood waits. The hearth is clean. The floor shows no fresh tracks. Those who leave Cold Creek Trapper Cabin often carry a quiet respect for the place. It does not ask to be feared. It does not seek attention. It simply continues its work, maintaining warmth and readiness in a landscape that offers little forgiveness. The cabin remains where it has always been, beside the frozen stream. And when night falls and the fire glows low, the sounds return, steady and familiar, as if someone is still there, tending the hearth, preparing the space, and making sure no one faces the cold alone. Broken Antler Cabin sits at the edge of a dense forest where the trees grow close together and light fades quickly beneath their branches. The structure itself is old and simple, built from thick logs darkened by years of weather. During the day, it appears ordinary, even welcoming, but the land around it feels strangely empty. No birds linger nearby. No small animals dart through the underbrush. The forest seems to hold its breath. Hunters were the first to notice something was wrong. Deer refused to approach the cabin. Trails that pass close to it suddenly bend away. Worn paths ending without explanation. Tracks that appear in the surrounding woods stop abruptly at a distance, as if the animals turn back all at once. Even during peak seasons, when wildlife is plentiful elsewhere, this patch of forest remains avoided. Experienced hunters describe moments of sudden silence. Animals that were feeding or moving calmly will bolt without warning, scattering in every direction. There is no visible cause. No scent of predators. No sound to explain the panic. The reaction is immediate and absolute, as if something unseen has crossed an invisible boundary. By daylight, guests staying at Broken Antler Cabin often feel uneasy without knowing why. The air feels thicker near the walls. Sounds from the forest seem muted, swallowed by the trees. Windows look out onto dense growth, but nothing stares back. Even so, there is a persistent sense of being watched, not by eyes, but by presence. As evening approaches, the tension deepens. The forest darkens quickly, shadows layering between trunks. Wind passes overhead but rarely reaches the ground. The silence becomes pronounced, broken only by the occasional snap of a distant branch. Guests retreat inside as night settles, closing shutters and lighting lamps that cast warm circles against the walls. It is after full darkness that the sounds begin. A slow scraping echoes along the exterior of the cabin. The noise is deliberate, uneven, like hard surfaces dragging across wood. Guests listening closely identify the sound as antlers, heavy and rough, sliding against the logs. The scraping moves from one wall to another, circling the structure without pause. The sound does not rush. It explores. There is no impact strong enough to shake the cabin. No sudden strikes. Just the persistent scrape, accompanied by the faint creak of wood under pressure. Those inside describe a vibration that travels through the walls, felt more than heard, as if the cabin itself is absorbing the contact. Then come the growls. Deep, resonant sounds rise from the forest, low and powerful. They do not resemble any familiar animal call. The growls echo between the trees, moving slowly around the cabina's perimeter. Sometimes they come from close range. Other times they fade into the distance, only to return from another direction. Other times they fade into the distance, only to return from another direction. The growls continue through the night. Guests report the feeling of being surrounded, even though nothing is ever seen. The sounds never overlap chaotically. They move with purpose, maintaining distance, testing boundaries. They move with purpose, maintaining distance, testing boundaries. At times, the scraping and growling occur together, filling the night with layered noise that makes sleep impossible. Fear builds not from sudden threats, but from endurance. Hours pass. The sounds do not weaken. Lamps flicker slightly as if responding to pressure changes in the air. Windows remain dark, reflecting only the interior light. Stepping outside feels unthinkable. Those inside wait, listening, counting breaths, hoping for dawn. The activity fades gradually as morning approaches. The growls soften, then retreat deeper into the forest. The scraping stops, ending with a final slow drag along the logs before silence returns. When the first light appears through the trees, the forest feels empty again, as if nothing disturbed it during the night. By daylight, there is no damage. No marks on the walls. No broken branches nearby. No tracks in the soil. The ground appears undisturbed, though the earth near the cabin often feels compacted, as if weight pressed down repeatedly without leaving clear impressions. Those who stay the night often leave early, unsettled but unable to explain exactly what frightened them most. Stories about broken antler cabins circulate quietly among locals. Some say the land was once a natural crossing point for animals, a place of competition and dominance. Over time, something shifted. The balance changed. What remains is a territory that wildlife instinctively avoids, guided by senses humans no longer fully understand. Natural explanations are suggested. Antlers can scrape against trees when deer move through dense areas. Large animals can produce deep vocalizations that echo unpredictably. Fear can amplify sound, turning ordinary noises into something more menacing in the dark. But these explanations fail to account for the patterns. Deer do not approach the cabin at all. The sounds circle with consistency. The timing repeats night after night when guests are present. And the growls carry an intelligence that feels aware rather than reactive. Some believe the cabin stands in a place claimed long ago. A place where the forest enforces its own rules. The antlers scraping the walls are not a warning, but a reminder. The growls are not a challenge, but a presence asserting itself. The cabin remains because it was built before the rules changed, allowed to stand but never truly welcomed. By midday, Broken Antler Cabin feels deceptively calm. Sunlight reaches the clearing. The forest resumes its gentle motion. Guests pack their belongings, glancing often toward the tree line. Hunters who pass nearby note the absence of animals and move on without comment. As night approaches once more, the forest prepares. Shadows gather. Paths empty. The land settles into silence. Broken antler cabin waits, still and unchanged. Knowing that when darkness returns, the antlers will scrape again. The growls will rise, and the forest will remind anyone inside that they are not alone, and never truly welcome, until dawn breaks once more. Fog Hollow Cabin rests in a shallow basin between low hills, a place that feels tucked away from the rest of the world. By day, the cabin appears ordinary, weathered wood surrounded by grass and scattered trees. The air feels open and clear, and the land stretches gently in every direction. Visitors arrive without concern, unaware of how completely the setting changes once night begins to fall. It does not drift in slowly or roll across the ground as fog usually does. It forms suddenly, thick and complete, wrapping the cabin in a pale wall that blocks distance and depth. Weather makes no difference. Clear skies, wind, or rain do nothing to stop it. Night after night, the fog settles with the same quiet certainty. From inside the cabin, the world disappears. Windows reveal only shifting gray, dense and close, pressing against the glass. Outdoor sounds dull and flatten, as if absorbed by the mist. Even familiar noises, like insects or distant wind, lose direction and clarity. The fog seems to listen as much as it hides. Guests notice movement within it. Just beyond clear vision, shapes pass through the fog, never fully forming. They stretch and bend as if made of the mist itself, retreating whenever eyes try to focus. The movement feels intentional, never random. The movement feels intentional, never random. The movement traces the outline of the cabin, sliding past windows and doors, always just out of reach. The movement traces the outline of the cabin, sliding past windows and doors, always just out of reach. Then the knocking begins. It starts softly, a dull tap against the roof, followed by another along the wall. The sound carries weight, as if something solid is testing the structure. The rhythm is uneven, never forming a pattern that can be predicted. Knocks arrive from above, then from the sides, then from places that should not be reachable. The sound never breaks anything. It does not splinter wood or shake walls. It simply announces presence, repeating again and again until attention is drawn to it. When guests speak or move suddenly, the knocking pauses, resuming only after silence returns. Those who step outside do so cautiously. The moment the door opens, fog pours inward, cold and damp, clinging to clothing and skin. Visibility drops to only a few steps ahead. The cabin light fades quickly behind, swallowed by the gray until it becomes a faint glow and then nothing at all. Orientation disappears almost immediately. Sounds lose direction. Footsteps echo without clear origin. The ground feels unfamiliar, even when walked moments before. Guests attempt to circle back, confident they are close, only to find themselves moving farther into the fog. Time stretches strangely outside. Minutes feel longer. Distance becomes uncertain. Some report walking steadily, convinced they are moving in a straight line, only to emerge hours later from the opposite side of the basin. Others stop walking entirely, afraid that movement itself is leading them astray. The fog never parts to guide them. Instead, it shifts subtly, opening paths that seem promising before closing them again. Shapes move at the edge of sight, never close enough to confirm, yet always present enough to be felt. The sense of being watched intensifies, steady and patient. Those who wander often describe confusion rather than fear. Thoughts blur. Memories feel distant. The idea of the cabin fades, replaced by the simple act of moving forward. Some forget why they stepped outside in the first place, focusing only on the next step, then the next. Inside the cabin, the knocking continues. It grows louder as the night deepens, spreading across roof and walls. The sound never matches footsteps or hands. It feels heavier, broader, as though something large is shifting its weight against the structure. The shapes in the fog move closer. They press against windows, blurring the glass with shadow and moisture. Yet no clear form ever appears. The fog refuses to give definition, protecting whatever moves within it from being fully seen. As dawn approaches, the fog begins to thin. The change is gradual, almost hesitant. Gray light filters in, softening edges and restoring depth to the land. The knocking fades, stopping without final sound. Shapes dissolve into nothing, leaving the cabin once again alone. Those who wandered return. They find themselves suddenly close to the cabin, often from directions they do not recognize. The structure appears as if it has been waiting, unchanged and calm. Many arrive exhausted, unsure how far they traveled or how much time passed. Sunrise reveals familiar ground that should have been obvious all along. The air clears completely, revealing open hills and quiet land. No trace of moisture remains on the cabin walls. No marks show where knocking occurred. The place looks harmless again, almost peaceful. Some remember shapes. Others remember sound. Those who wandered struggle to explain where they went, their stories filled with gaps and uncertainty. What remains consistent is the feeling that the fog was not merely weather, but a presence with purpose. Fog Hollow Cabin does not trap people. It misleads them. The fog surrounds, obscures, and confuses, guiding movement without force. It invites steps outward and then erases the path back, not through violence, but through quiet disorientation. The cabin remains standing, solid and ordinary by day. Yet every night, regardless of season or sky, the fog returns. It wraps the land again, bringing movement without form and sound without source. It waits for doors to open, for curiosity to overcome caution. Those who leave Fog Hollow carry something with them. A memory of losing direction in familiar ground. A sense that the world can narrow and widen without warning. The understanding that some places do not reveal themselves all at once. They wait. They surround. And when night falls, the fog finds its way back, closing gently around the cabin, patient and complete, ready to begin again. Ash Tree Cabin stands at the edge of a quiet woodland clearing, built close enough to a massive ash tree that its roots press visibly against the foundation stones. The tree towers above the roof, its branches stretching wide and heavy, casting long shadows even in full daylight. The cabin appears simple and well kept, yet something about its position feels deliberate, as if it was placed there to remain under the tree's constant presence. From the moment guests arrive, a faint scent lingers in the air. It is the smell of smoke, light but unmistakable, like embers long cooled. No fire burns nearby. The chimney is cold. The scent drifts in and out, strongest near the ash tree itself, clinging to bark and leaves before slipping through open windows and doorframes. During the day, the cabin feels calm but watchful. The forest around it remains unusually quiet. Birds keep their distance from the clearing. Wind moves through the ash tree with a low, whispering sound that never quite matches the breeze in the surrounding woods. Guests often find themselves glancing toward the tree without knowing why. As evening settles, the atmosphere changes. The scent of smoke grows stronger after sunset, filling the cabin with a dry, burned odor that settles in the throat. Soon after night falls, sound begins to travel through the cabin. Guests report hearing the faint crackling of flames, soft and rhythmic, like logs settling in a hearth. The sound comes from no single direction. It drifts through the rooms, sometimes close, sometimes distant, never loud enough to pinpoint. Checking the fireplace reveals only cold stone and untouched ash from previous visits. The crackling continues anyway. As darkness deepens, shadows begin to move along the walls. At first they appear natural, shaped by the ash tree's branches swaying outside. Over time, the motion changes. The shadows stretch and narrow, forming outlines that do not match the tree or any object within the room. They take on distorted human shapes, elongated and uneven, flickering as if cast by unseen flames. Arms bend at impossible angles. Heads tilt without bodies. The shadows overlap and separate, never holding still long enough to study closely. Lights do not stop the movement. Lamps remain steady, yet the shadows continue to flicker across the walls and ceiling. They do not respond to movement within the room. Walking through them produces no change. They exist independently, animated by something other than light. Despite the unsettling display, many guests feel an unexpected calm. Fear arrives slowly, dulled by a sense of familiarity that makes the experience feel strangely intimate. The crackling sound becomes almost soothing, like a fire meant to provide warmth rather than danger. Sleep comes unevenly. Those who rest describe heavy dreams filled with heat and drifting shapes. Waking during the night often brings confusion. The smell of smoke feels stronger, thicker, yet no source can be found. Some wake to complete silence, the crackling gone, the shadows frozen in place like ordinary darkness. Morning reveals the most unsettling detail. Guests step from their beds to find fine gray ash scattered across the floor. It gathers in corners, along doorways, and beneath windows. The amount varies from night to night, but it is always present after reported activity. The fireplace remains untouched. The stove is cold. No signs of fire damage appear anywhere inside or outside the cabin. The ash is light and powdery, unlike the residue of burned wood. It carries the same faint scent that lingers in the air, dry and old. Attempts to clean it away succeed only temporarily. By the following morning, traces often return. Stories surrounding the ash tree are shared quietly among locals. The tree is said to be older than the surrounding forest, its roots reaching deep into layers of earth shaped by past events. Long before the cabin was built, fires burned through the area, not as disasters, but as controlled rituals meant to clear and protect the land. The ash tree survived those fires, standing unharmed while others fell. Over time, it became a marker, a boundary between what was burned and what was spared. When the cabin was constructed beside it, the balance may have shifted. Some believe the tree remembers the heat, the sound, and the movement of those fires. The crackling heard at night is thought to be an echo, repeating itself through wood and soil. The shadows may be impressions left behind, gestures preserved without form. The ash that appears could be the land reminding those above it of what once passed through. What makes Ash Tree Cabin unsettling is not aggression, but persistence. Nothing threatens harm. Nothing demands attention. The experiences repeat gently, night after night, as if maintaining a cycle rather than escalating one. Guests who stay longer report growing awareness of the tree itself. Its presence feels heavier at night, its outline more defined against the sky. Standing beneath it brings a sense of warmth that does not match the air temperature. Subtle and brief. By daylight, the cabin returns to stillness. The smoke scent fades. Shadows behave normally. The ash tree stands silent, its bark cool to the touch. Only faint traces of ash and memory suggest what occurred after dark. Ash Tree Cabin remains open to visitors seeking solitude and reflection. Most leave with questions rather than fear. They remember the sound of unseen flames. The flicker of shadows that did not belong. The ash that appeared without fire. The tree continues to stand beside the cabin, roots deep, branches wide, holding its place through time. Whatever it guards or remembers, it does so quietly, allowing the past to surface only in whispers of smoke and drifting ash when night falls once more. Bearclaw Ridge Cabin sits alone near the tree line, high above a narrow valley where fog settles each morning and leaves slowly decay beneath towering pines. The structure itself is simple. Thick wooden walls. A low-pitched roof. Windows set deep into the logs as if meant to keep something out as much as keep warmth in. During the day, the cabin feels solid and dependable, a quiet shelter surrounded by wilderness. Every morning brings the same discovery. Fresh scratches carved into the outer walls. They run vertically along the logs, deep grooves cut cleanly through aged wood. The marks are too high to reach from the ground, stretching well above a standing Persona's head. They are too deep and evenly spaced to belong to any known animal in the area. Each day, the scratches appear in slightly different places, as if something circles the cabin slowly through the night. Caretakers have attempted repairs. Damaged logs are sanded smooth. Protective panels are installed. Cameras are mounted to monitor the exterior. Yet the scratches return, always by morning, always cutting through new surfaces as easily as old. No tracks are found nearby. No wood chips remain on the ground. The forest floor beneath the marks is undisturbed. Guests often notice the scratches only after settling in. At first, curiosity outweighs concern. Old cabins collect marks. Weather and wildlife leave signs over time. But when visitors compare one morning to the next, the change becomes undeniable. New lines where none existed before. Fresh damage that could not have formed in daylight. But when visitors compare one morning to the next, the change becomes undeniable. New lines where none existed before. Fresh damage that could not have formed in daylight. Night brings a different experience. As darkness closes in and the forest grows quiet, guests describe a sudden awareness of presence. The air outside the cabin feels heavier. Sound carries less distance. Even familiar night noises seem muted, as if the woods are listening rather than moving. It begins softly, just beyond the windows. Slow and deliberate. Too deep to be wind. Too rhythmic to be animals passing through. The sound lingers close to the glass, rising and falling steadily, as if something large is standing still and drawing breath inches away. Those who hear it often freeze in place. The breathing never scratches. It simply remains, filling the silence. Guests report feeling watched, not from above or behind, but from directly outside, close enough to touch the walls. Curtains remain closed. Lights stay dim. No one wants to draw attention. Some gather the courage to look outside. They see nothing. No movement. No shape. No reflection. The forest remains dark and empty, yet the breathing continues for a moment longer before fading away. When it stops, the silence feels unnatural, stretched too thin. As the night progresses, another sensation often follows. A pressure against the cabin walls. Not a strike. Not a blow. Just a slow, deliberate push from the outside. It feels exploratory rather than aggressive, as though something is testing the structure, learning its limits. This pressure moves. From one wall to another. From the side to the back. Sometimes near the corners. Always slow. Always controlled. Never enough to cause damage, but enough to be unmistakable. Guests feel it through floors and furniture, a subtle shift that makes the cabin seem smaller than before. Few sleep through the night. Many sit awake until dawn, listening, counting breaths, waiting for the forest to return to normal. Some pack their belongings quietly in the dark, choosing to leave before first light. Others wait until morning, stepping outside with relief only to find new scratches waiting for them. Those who leave early share similar descriptions. A deep sense of unease. The feeling of being measured. The impression that something remained just out of sight, choosing not to reveal itself fully. They speak calmly, without panic, but with certainty that staying longer would not have been wise. Attempts to capture evidence have failed. Cameras malfunction during the night. Audio recordings capture only faint static or distorted noise. Motion sensors trigger without showing movement. Whatever causes the scratches and sounds does not leave a clear trace. Local residents avoid the ridge after dark. They do not speculate openly. They say the land is old and quiet for a reason. That some places are shaped by patterns not meant to be interrupted. They note that the ridge has always been a boundary. A place where trails turn away rather than cross through. Animals behave strangely near the cabin. Birds avoid the area entirely after sunset. Deer paths curve wide around the clearing. Even insects thin out as darkness settles, leaving the cabin surrounded by an unnatural stillness. By day, Bearclaw Ridge cabin appears peaceful again. Sunlight reveals the scratches in sharp detail. The walls stand firm. The forest resumes its gentle movement. Guests arriving in daylight often dismiss the stories as exaggeration, until night falls and the pattern begins again. The cabin remains available, maintained, and structurally sound. Yet few stay longer than planned. Those who do often leave with the same thought lingering in their minds. Whatever comes to the cabin at night does not rush. It does not need to. It returns every evening, patient and deliberate, leaving its marks as proof of presence rather than threat. And each visit ends with the same quiet understanding. Some places are not meant to be challenged. They are meant to be endured only briefly. That is all. Moonfall Cabin stands alone at the edge of a dense forest, far from roads and artificial light. The ground around the cabin feels lighter, the shadows softer, as if the forest hesitates to darken completely. When night falls, the effect becomes impossible to ignore. Moonlight spills across the clearing in a steady glow, silver and constant. Clouds drift overhead, thick and heavy, yet the light does not fade. The moon may be hidden, but its presence remains, unwavering. Guests often step outside to test their eyes. They look up, expecting breaks in the cloud cover, but the sky remains sealed and dark. Still, the clearing shines. Leaves glimmer faintly. Stones cast clear shadows. The cabin appears outlined, as if marked for attention. Sleep comes quickly inside Moonfall Cabin, but it is never empty. Dreams begin almost immediately, vivid and continuous. They feel the ground beneath their feet, soft with pine needles and damp earth. They hear distant water, slow wind through branches, and their own breathing moving calmly in rhythm. In these dreams, the forest feels familiar. Paths appear without effort, winding naturally between trees. There is no fear, only direction. Some dream of following the moonlight deeper into the woods, watching it spill across rocks and roots, always guiding, never blinding. Others dream of standing still while the forest moves around them, trees shifting slightly, opening and closing spaces like careful gates. When morning comes, the dreams linger. Guests wake with the sensation of having traveled far, muscles heavy with remembered movement. Some notice dirt beneath their fingernails, packed lightly but clearly, as though they had brushed soil or pushed aside leaves. Shoes left by the door show traces of mud that were not there the night before. No one recalls leaving the cabin. The door is another detail that troubles many visitors. Before sleep, it is checked carefully. Locks are tested. The latch holds firm. Yet more than once, guests wake to find the door standing open, swinging gently inward or resting wide against the wall. There are no signs of forced entry. The ground outside shows no footprints, only the same smooth layer of leaves and soil as before. The lock remains intact, unbroken and functional. The cabin seems to have opened itself, quietly and without resistance. Those who experience this often feel a brief moment of confusion rather than panic. The open door feels less like an intrusion and more like an invitation that has already been accepted. The forest beyond looks calm, bathed in the same steady moonlight as the night before. Some guests choose to step outside in the early hours, drawn by a sense of unfinished movement. Local knowledge offers quiet explanations. Moonfall Cabin, some say, was built where the forest meets a natural crossing, a place where boundaries thin. Night here is not an absence of day, but a continuation. Dreams and waking share the same ground. Movement does not always require awareness. The moonlight, according to these stories, is not light at all, but attention. It rests on the cabin and the clearing because something here is meant to be noticed, revisited, walked through again and again. Guests who resist the pull of sleep report a different experience. Staying awake late into the night, they hear subtle sounds around the cabin. Not footsteps, but shifts. Leaves settling. Branches bending slightly, then returning. The door handle grows cool beneath the hand, as though touched by air colder than the room. The cabin does not feel hostile. The forest does not feel predatory. Everything moves with patience, as if time itself has slowed to accommodate careful passage. By the second night, many guests stop locking the door. Not because they feel careless, but because the lock feels unnecessary. The door opens only when it needs to, and always closes again by morning. No belongings are disturbed. No damage is done. Only the sense of having gone somewhere remains. The dreams grow clearer with each night. Some guests remember kneeling to touch the earth. Others recall standing beneath towering trees, looking up at moonlight filtering down like falling snow. A few remember returning to the cabin at dawn, stepping inside just before waking, the door closing softly behind them. When guests finally leave Moonfall Cabin, the forest seems reluctant to let them go. The path back feels longer, winding more than expected. Light fades slowly, even as the sun rises fully overhead. Days later, memories surface unexpectedly. The smell of damp soil. The weight of moonlight on skin. The feeling of walking without destination or urgency. Some notice their hands, clean now, but still remembering the texture of earth beneath their nails. Moonfall Cabin remains where it has always stood, glowing quietly beneath cloudy skies, waiting without impatience. Night after night, the light returns. Dreams deepen. Doors open. And the forest continues to walk with those who sleep inside, guiding them through paths that exist only when the moon decides to fall. Silent Meadow Cabin rests at the edge of a wide clearing surrounded by dense forest. The trees stand tall and close together, their branches overlapping to form a thick wall of green. The cabin itself is modest and weathered, its wood faded by years of sun and rain. At first glance, nothing seems out of place. The silence is what people notice first. Even during daylight, the forest around the cabin feels unnaturally still. No buzz of insects in the grass. No birds call from the trees. Leaves barely rustle, even when a breeze passes through the clearing. Sound seems to fall flat here, as if absorbed by the air before it can travel. Visitors often pause when they arrive, waiting for the forest to announce itself. It never does. Footsteps sound louder than expected as people approach the cabin. The crunch of gravel or dry grass carries too far, echoing briefly before vanishing. The quiet presses inward, making even small movements feel intrusive, as though the meadow resents being disturbed. As evening approaches, the stillness deepens. The sun lowers behind the trees, and shadows stretch across the clearing. Normally, dusk brings a rise in sound, insects calling, birds settling for the night. At Silent Meadow Cabin, nothing changes. The forest remains mute, holding its breath as daylight fades away. Once darkness settles, the silence becomes overwhelming. Inside the cabin, guests begin to hear things they would normally never notice. Their own breathing sounds loud and uneven. Shifting in a chair produces a dull thud that lingers too long. Even the sound of fabric brushing against skin feels exaggerated. Those who speak do so quietly, instinctively lowering their voices. Words feel out of place here, breaking the careful balance of stillness. Conversations fade quickly, replaced by listening, waiting, and the awareness of every small sound made. Sleep does not come easily. Lying in bed, guests describe an unusual sense of pressure in the room. The air feels heavier, pressing down rather than surrounding them. The silence becomes so complete that it feels loud, a constant presence filling every space. As the night deepens, some begin to feel weight on their chest. It starts subtly, like the sensation of a heavy blanket settling. Breathing becomes more deliberate, requiring effort. The pressure does not hurt, but it is unmistakable, as if something unseen has sat beside them or leaned against their body. Those affected often open their eyes, expecting to see someone in the room. The pressure comes and goes in slow waves. It does not pin them down completely, but it demands attention. Thoughts race as the silence continues to press in. Guests focus on breathing, listening to the echo of each breath filling the room. Some report hearing a faint shift near the bed, like fabric moving or weight adjusting slightly. Turning on a light brings no relief. The room looks unchanged, ordinary, calm. The silence remains. Those who manage to fall asleep often wake suddenly, convinced they were not alone moments before. The feeling fades quickly, leaving behind a racing heart and the lingering impression of presence. Dawn feels impossibly far away during these hours. Stories surrounding Silent Meadow Cabin are shared quietly among locals. Many refuse to stay overnight. Others warn visitors to leave lights on or sleep with doors open, though these measures rarely change the experience. The meadow does not respond to preparation or caution. It simply remains as it is. Natural explanations are sometimes offered. Certain landscapes can suppress sound due to terrain and vegetation. Dense tree lines can block insects and birds from nesting nearby. The human mind, deprived of normal environmental noise, becomes hyper-aware of internal sensations. Pressure on the chest can occur during anxious or half-dreaming states. Yet these explanations fall short for those who have stayed the night. The silence begins before fear. The pressure comes without panic. The experience feels external rather than imagined. The cabin does not creak or settle like other old structures. It remains perfectly still, as if listening along with its guests. Some believe the meadow itself is responsible. Long ago, the clearing may have been a place avoided by animals, a natural pause in the forest where sound simply did not carry. Over time, the absence of life became part of the land's identity. The cabin was built there out of convenience, not understanding. Others believe the silence is protective rather than threatening. That whatever presses close at night is not hostile, only curious. The pressure beside sleeping guests feels deliberate, controlled, never escalating into harm. It lingers, then withdraws, leaving people shaken but unharmed. By morning, Silent Meadow Cabin feels different. Light returns to the clearing, and with it a sense of relief. The pressure lifts completely. Breathing feels normal again. Guests step outside, surprised by how ordinary everything looks. The grass moves gently. The trees stand still. The silence remains, but it feels less oppressive in daylight. No insects appear. No birds arrive. The meadow stays quiet. Those who leave often glance back as they walk away, struck by how quickly the forest closes in behind them. The cabin becomes harder to see with each step, blending into the trees until it nearly disappears. Silent Meadow Cabin continues to stand where it always has, surrounded by quiet that feels too complete to be accidental. At night, when the world usually speaks the loudest, the meadow chooses silence instead. And in that silence, guests learn how loud their own presence can feel, when nothing else is willing to make a sound. Crooked Creek Cabin rests in a shallow bend of the land, where water has carved a narrow path through stone and soil. By day, the creek looks ordinary. Clear water slips past smooth rocks, moving steadily downhill, catching light in soft ripples. The cabin stands nearby, weathered but welcoming, its porch facing the sound of flowing water that feels familiar and calming. As daylight fades, the creek begins to change. At first, it is subtle. The sound shifts slightly, losing its easy rhythm. Guests sitting on the porch notice that the water seems louder than before, deeper in tone, as if the creek has grown heavier. After full darkness settles, the impossible becomes clear. The water flows backward. It does not rush or surge. It simply reverses direction, sliding uphill along the creek bed as if gravity has loosened its hold. The backward flow is calm and precise. Ripples form where they should not. Reflections stretch and fold in unfamiliar patterns. Small branches caught in the current drift upstream, stopping briefly as if considering their path before continuing on. The creek does not struggle. It moves as though this reversal is natural, practiced, and temporary. Along the bank, shadows begin to appear. They gather close to the water, kneeling shapes formed from darkness and reflected moonlight. At first they resemble uneven rocks or clusters of plants. But their outlines sharpen as eyes adjust. The shapes remain low, bent toward the stream, motionless and attentive. They do not drink. They do not touch the water. They kneel as if listening. Guests who notice them feel a quiet shift inside. Curiosity replaces confusion. The sound of the creek becomes easier to focus on, smoother, almost comforting. The backward flow creates a rhythm that invites attention, pulling the mind away from time and place. Those who watch for too long feel it. A gentle draw settles into the body, starting in the chest and spreading outward. It is not fear or urgency. It feels like invitation, like recognition. Like the water has something to offer that has been patiently waiting. Some guests stand without realizing it. They move toward the creek slowly, drawn by the sound and the kneeling shadows. Each step feels lighter than the last. The cabin behind them fades into the background, its shape less important than the stream ahead. The world narrows until only water and shadow remain. Those who resist describe the effort it takes. Turning away feels like breaking a fragile connection. The pull does not vanish immediately. It tugs gently, persistently, urging attention back toward the creek. Even after stepping inside the cabin, guests hear the water clearly, its backward flow echoing through walls and floorboards. Some wake with the feeling of standing at the edge of the stream, though they never left their beds. The kneeling shadows remain until late in the night. They do not move or acknowledge watchers. They simply hold their position, silhouettes against moving water. Their stillness deepens the sense that the creek is the focus, not the observers. The shadows feel like witnesses to something ongoing and familiar. As the night approaches its deepest hours, the pull grows stronger. Guests who watch again feel drawn with renewed intensity. Thoughts slow, awareness narrows. Then, without warning, the creek changes again. The water slows, hesitates, and resumes its natural direction. The sound shifts back to its daytime rhythm. Leaves drift downstream once more. The reversal ends as quietly as it began. The kneeling shadows fade. They thin into darkness, blending with rocks and tree roots until nothing remains but empty banks. The pull dissolves, leaving behind a sudden awareness of cold air and night sounds returning to normal. Morning reveals no sign of what occurred. The creek flows downhill as it should. The water looks clear and harmless. The bank shows no marks where shadows knelt. Guests question their memories in daylight, replaying the night with uncertainty. Yet the feeling lingers. Those who experienced the reversal remember the sound most clearly. Not the impossibility of it, but the calm certainty with which it happened. The creek did not fight gravity. It ignored it. Locals speak of Crooked Creek with careful respect. They describe it as a place that does not follow the same rules at night. Water remembers paths it once took, they say, and sometimes chooses to revisit them. The land here is old, shaped by forces that move beneath the surface and do not always settle. Crooked Creek Cabin remains quiet by day and watchful by night. Most visitors leave with little more than a story they struggle to explain. A few carry something deeper, a memory of being invited toward flowing water that moved the wrong way and felt right. They remember the kneeling shadows and the calm pull toward the stream. They remember how easy it felt to step closer. And long after they have gone, the creek continues to flow, waiting for night to return, when gravity loosens its grip and the water remembers another direction. Pine Needle Cabin sits deep within a dense evergreen forest, surrounded on all sides by towering pines whose branches knit together overhead. The cabin blends into this environment easily, its wooden walls matching the colors of bark and earth, as if it grew there rather than being built. From the first step inside, something feels out of place. Pine needles cover the floor in scattered layers, collecting in corners, along baseboards, and beneath furniture. Sweeping clears the floor completely. The wood beneath is clean and bare. Windows remain closed. Doors are shut. Yet within hours, sometimes minutes, the needles return. No drafts explain their movement. No open path explains their presence. By day, the cabin remains quiet. The forest outside hums softly with distant wind and occasional bird calls. Inside, the air feels cool and still. The needles lie unmoving, as if placed deliberately rather than scattered by chance. The forest grows louder at dusk, branches shifting and needles brushing against one another high above. Shadows deepen around the cabin, and the light inside begins to feel isolated from the world beyond the windows. The smell of pine strengthens, filling the rooms with a sharp, clean scent that borders on overwhelming. Night brings sound. Guests hear rustling inside the walls, faint at first, like dry leaves stirred by a gentle breeze. The rustling grows more noticeable as the night deepens. It passes behind headboards, along ceiling beams, and beneath the floorboards. Sometimes it pauses, then resumes elsewhere, as if something is exploring the interior from within the structure itself. Sleep becomes uneasy. Those who wake during the night often lie still, listening. The sound never breaks into sudden movement. It remains controlled, measured, almost careful. The cabin does not creak or shift under pressure. Instead, it seems to accommodate the sound, as though designed to let it pass through. In the dim light, pine needles appear where none were before. They gather beside beds and chairs. Some rest on windowsills beneath closed glass. Others collect in narrow trails that lead nowhere in particular. Walking through the cabin leaves clear footprints that remain visible until morning. Guests report a growing sense of being shared space rather than alone. The cabin feels less like shelter and more like a boundary, separating inside from outside only in the most basic sense. The forest feels close, attentive, and patient. By morning, the rustling stops. Sunlight returns in narrow shafts, and the forest resumes its daytime calm. The cabin stands quiet again, unchanged except for the needles that now blanket the floor more heavily than before. Cleaning them becomes an exercise in repetition rather than resolution. Some guests attempt to seal gaps, checking vents, chimneys, and crawl spaces. Nothing explains the volume or placement of the needles. The forest surrounding Pine Needle Cabin is said to be old, far older than the structure within it. When the cabin was built, it did not replace the forest. It interrupted it. According to these stories, the forest does not resist intrusion with force. It responds slowly, subtly, reclaiming space in small ways. The needles that appear are not debris, but presence. Each one marks a point where the boundary weakens. Some guests describe moments of stillness during the night when the rustling stops completely. In those moments, the cabin feels unusually full, as if the air itself has thickened. Breathing feels deeper, heavier, like standing beneath low branches. The sensation passes, but it leaves a lasting impression. Others report waking with pine needles caught in their hair or resting on their blankets, though no movement was felt during sleep. The needles are always dry, never fresh, as if they have already weathered time before arriving. What unsettles most is the consistency. The phenomenon does not escalate. It does not vary wildly. Each night follows the same pattern. Needles appear. Sounds travel through the walls. The forest presses closer, then withdraws slightly by morning. Those who stay multiple nights often begin to accept the presence rather than fight it. Cleaning becomes optional. The needles feel less intrusive when left undisturbed. The rustling becomes familiar, almost rhythmic, blending into the sounds of wind and trees outside. Leaving the cabin brings an unexpected sense of separation. Guests report feeling lighter once beyond the tree line, as if something that had been pressing gently against them has finally released. Looking back, the cabin appears unchanged, quiet, and still. The needles continue to gather. The walls continue to whisper at night. Piece by piece, the forest makes its presence known, not through force or fear, but through persistence. Pine Needle Cabin remains standing, open to visitors drawn by isolation and quiet. Most arrive expecting a retreat from the forest. Few realize the forest has other intentions. The cabin does not belong to the forest entirely, and the forest does not fully enter the cabin. Instead, the two exist in uneasy balance, sharing space in silence. Those who stay there understand this truth quickly. The forest is never truly outside. It waits patiently, slipping inward one needle at a time, reminding every visitor that some places are not meant to be separated at all. Hollow Bone Cabin rests in a shallow hollow where trees grow thin and the ground sinks unevenly toward a dark line of forest. A small wooden structure. A single door. Narrow windows set low, close to the earth. By daylight, the cabin appears quiet and abandoned, its age revealed only by weathered boards and a roof dulled by years of rain. Footsteps sink slightly into the soil, as if the earth has never fully packed itself together. The air feels cooler here, even on warm days, and sound behaves strangely. Voices do not travel far. Echoes seem to fold inward rather than outward. The first night is when the sounds begin. After darkness settles and the forest grows still, a clicking noise rises from below the floorboards. It is faint at first. Irregular. A dry, hollow sound, like pieces of wood or stone touching briefly and pulling apart. The clicks move slowly, drifting from one side of the cabin to the other, never staying in the same place for long. Guests lie awake listening. The sound does not follow a rhythm. It pauses without warning, then resumes from a different point beneath the floor. Sometimes it grows closer, sharp enough to feel through the boards. Other times it fades so completely that listeners wonder if it was ever real. As the night deepens, the clicking becomes more deliberate. It starts to sound intentional, as if something below is testing the space above it. The floorboards respond with soft creaks, settling under pressure that does not quite break through. No matter how carefully guests listen, the sound never resolves into something familiar. Sleep comes poorly, if at all. Those who do drift off often wake suddenly, unsure what disturbed them. The air feels heavier. The cabin seems smaller. Then another sound joins the clicking. Scratching. It rises from beneath the floor, slow and careful, as if something is dragging itself upward. The sound is not violent. It does not tear or strike. It traces the underside of the boards with patience, moving inch by inch, always below, never breaking through. Guests report sitting upright in bed, barely breathing. The scratching travels, circling the cabine's interior. It pauses beneath walls. It lingers near corners. It never reaches the door. The sound remains contained, as though whatever causes it understands the limits of the structure. By morning, the noises stop. Sunlight filters through the trees, and the forest resumes its quiet movement. Birds return. Insects stir. The cabin feels ordinary again, almost peaceful. It is only when guests open the door that the next discovery is made. Small bones arranged neatly on the ground outside. They form simple patterns. Lines. Circles. Careful groupings placed directly in front of the entrance. The bones are clean and dry, light in color, with no sign of soil or decay clinging to them. They appear intentionally selected and positioned, not scattered or dropped. No tracks surround them. The ground is undisturbed. No drag marks. No footprints leading away. The bones sit alone, as if placed and then abandoned without movement. Guests often stand silently, unsure how long they have been there, or how they arrived. Caretakers remove the bones each morning. They dispose of them carefully and check the surrounding area. No source is ever found. No burrows appear. No remains nearby suggest where the bones originate. Each morning, the ground looks untouched again. Those who stay a second night rarely do so by choice. The clicking returns sooner, louder than before. The scratching feels closer, more focused. Some describe the sensation of pressure beneath their feet, as though the floor is being gently lifted and lowered. Others report feeling vibrations through the bed frame, subtle and steady. Most guests leave before dawn. They pack quietly, avoiding the doorway until first light. When they step outside, they do not look closely at the ground. They do not wait to see if the bones have returned. They leave with the strong sense that one night was enough. Locals speak carefully about Hollow Bone Cabin. They say the land beneath it was never solid. That it holds old spaces where things settle and resettle. Some believe the clicking is the sound of empty spaces shifting. Others say the bones are offerings, placed not as a threat, but as a marker. Animals avoid the area entirely at night. Paths that pass nearby curve away from the hollow. Birds do not roost above the cabin. Even insects thin out after sunset, leaving the air unnaturally quiet. The forest seems to hold its distance, as if respecting a boundary drawn long ago. Attempts to document the sounds have failed. Audio recordings capture only faint static and low vibrations. Cameras placed beneath the cabin malfunction or stop recording during the night. No equipment has ever captured the source of the scratching or clicking directly. By day, Hollow Bone Cabin appears harmless. Sunlight warms the boards. The ground looks stable. The hollow feels calm. New visitors arrive, skeptical of stories, confident in daylight logic. They step inside, unpack, and settle in, unaware of what waits beneath the floor. As night falls again, the hollow grows quiet. The clicking begins. Slow. Dry. Patient. Something moves below, testing the space above, arranging what it brings to the surface, then retreating once more. The cabin remains standing, unchanged, while those who stay inside learn the same lesson as those before them. Some places are not meant to remind. An hollow bone cabin reminds every visitor why very few choose to stay past one night. Snowblind Cabin stands high in a remote stretch of forest where elevation and shadow seem to hold their own weather. Even in midsummer, when valleys below are warm and green, the ground here remains pale and stiff. Frost lingers in the soil. Pines carry a dusting of white long after snowmelt should have passed. The cabin waits in that cold pocket, unchanged by season. From the outside, it looks ordinary enough. Thick logs, narrow windows, a steep roof built to shed heavy snow. But stepping inside reveals the truth immediately. The air is cold. Not cool or refreshing, but sharp and dry, the kind of cold that tightens the chest. Guests see their breath form clouds as soon as they close the door behind them. The cold does not drift or fluctuate. It settles. Fires burn reluctantly in the hearth, offering light more than warmth. Even when flames rise high and steady, the room temperature barely shifts. Hands numb quickly. Metal surfaces sting to the touch. The cabin feels sealed away from the outside world, operating under different rules. By day, the forest around Snowblind Cabin appears muted, as if color has been drained away. Greens fade to gray. Shadows flatten. Sunlight filters through branches but provides no heat. Snow patches remain tucked between roots and rocks, untouched even after weeks without snowfall. Night brings movement. As darkness settles, guests looking through the windows notice pale shapes drifting between the trees. They are not solid. They slide smoothly, blending into the snow and reappearing farther away. Sometimes they resemble tall figures. Other times they stretch and narrow, losing any clear outline. They never approach the cabin directly. They circle, pass behind trunks, and vanish into deeper forest. The shapes do not reflect light. They absorb it. Watching them for too long creates a strange strain behind the eyes, as if the brain is trying to interpret something it was never meant to define. When guests look away and then glance back, the shapes are always gone, leaving only still trees and drifting frost. Sound behaves oddly here as well. During the day, the forest is quiet, but not silent. Wind moves faintly through branches. Ice cracks and settles. At night, the wind changes character. It rises suddenly, sweeping through the trees in low, steady bursts. Within it, guests sometimes hear distant cries. The sounds are muffled, carried unevenly, distorted by distance and cold. They never rise into clarity. They never form words. They resemble voices pushed through thick snow, calling from far away and failing to reach their destination. Those who step outside to listen more closely find the forest eerily empty. The cold intensifies beyond the cabin walls, tightening around the body. Sound flattens completely. Even footsteps seem swallowed by the ground. The sense of distance collapses, making the trees feel closer than they are, pressing inward. Sleep inside Snowblind Cabin is heavy and restless. Guests wake frequently, unsure why. Frost creeps along the inside of the window frames, thickening as the night deepens. Breath fogs the room even beneath heavy blankets. Dreams come fragmented, filled with white landscapes and blurred horizons where sky and ground merge. Many report waking with the sensation of having lost direction, as though they stood somewhere open and vast, unable to tell which way led back. The feeling fades with daylight but leaves a residue of unease that lingers beneath conscious thought. Local stories explain the cold without explaining its origin. Snowblind cabin, they say, sits in a place where winter learned to stay. Long ago, storms gathered here and refused to move on, layering year after year until the land forgot how to release the cold. The forest adapted. The cabin endured. Everything slowed. The white shapes, according to some, are not figures at all, but memories of movement trapped in frozen air. The forest remembers those who passed through during harsher times, when losing direction meant losing everything. Their motion remains, replaying without bodies or voices. The cries carried by the wind are never described as threatening. They are distant, strained, and unfinished. More like echoes than warnings. Guests who hear them often feel a pull to listen, not out of fear, but out of recognition. As if the sound belongs to the place rather than to people. Despite the cold, the cabin does not feel abandoned. The structure is solid. The roof holds. The fire draws cleanly. Supplies left inside remain untouched. There is a sense of maintenance, of quiet preservation. The cold protects rather than destroys, keeping the cabin exactly as it is. Those who stay multiple nights report a subtle shift. The cold becomes familiar. Breath clouds feel normal. The forest loses its edge and becomes simply present. The white shapes appear less frequently. The wind quiets. It is as though the cabin tests those who enter, then settles once it understands they will not panic. Leaving Snowblind cabin brings an immediate contrast. The road down leads into warmer air. Snow vanishes abruptly. Colors return. Sounds grow fuller. Only then do guests realize how muted everything had been. The return to normal sensation feels overwhelming, almost loud. Looking back, the cabin appears unchanged, pale against the dark forest, already reclaiming its silence. Snowblind cabin remains frozen through every season, a pocket of winter preserved beyond time. It does not pursue those who leave. It does not reveal more than it must. It simply waits, holding cold, memory, and motion in perfect stillness. And when night falls and the wind rises, white shapes move once more between the trees. And distant cries drift through the frozen air. Reminding anyone who listens that some places do not thaw, and were never meant to. Old Ranger cabin stands deep within the forest, far from paved roads and modern signals. Tall trees surround it on all sides, their trunks forming a natural barrier that filters light and sound. The cabin was built decades ago as a functional shelter, a place where forest rangers once monitored weather, tracked fires, and kept watch over miles of wilderness. By day, it looks abandoned but intact, its wooden walls worn smooth by time rather than decay. The moment visitors arrive, many feel it. A quiet sense of being observed settles in, not sharp or alarming, but steady and persistent. The forest around the cabin feels alert. Branches hang motionless, and the air seems heavier close to the structure, as if the space immediately around it holds more than just silence. Inside, the cabin is sparse. Old hooks line the walls where equipment once hung. A narrow desk sits beneath a small window facing the trees. Dust gathers in corners, undisturbed for long stretches. There are no radios, no wires, no modern devices of any kind. Yet even in daylight, the interior feels active, as if something is waiting. As evening approaches, the atmosphere changes. Light fades quickly beneath the canopy, and the cabin interior grows dim. Shadows settle into familiar shapes that seem to linger longer than they should. Sounds from the forest thin out, replaced by an unnatural quiet that presses inward rather than outward. It is usually after sunset that the first sound is heard. A faint crackling noise drifts through the cabin, soft and uneven. At first, it resembles wind brushing through dry leaves or distant rain. The sound does not come from outside. It emerges from within the walls, low and persistent. The crackling grows clearer with time. It becomes unmistakable radio static, the kind associated with weak signals and damaged transmissions. The noise rises and falls, breaking briefly before returning again. There is no equipment present to produce it. No batteries. No antennas. And yet the sound remains, filling the small cabin with restless energy. Then voices begin to form. They do not arrive suddenly. Words emerge slowly. They speak calmly at first. Then with urgency, calling out for assistance. Requesting location confirmation. Asking for response. Trapped within a narrow range of communication. These are calls for help, sent into silence and never answered. Guests describe a powerful emotional response to the voices. Some feel compelled to respond, to speak aloud, to reassure whoever is calling. Others freeze, unsure whether moving or speaking will make the sound stronger. The cabin seems to amplify the noise, carrying it along the walls and ceiling until it feels impossible to escape. The sense of being watched intensifies during these moments. It does not feel threatening, but focused. As if the cabin itself is aware of its occupants, registering their presence while continuing its routine. Those who stay late into the night often experience the same sequence. Static builds. Voices emerge. Calls repeat. Then, gradually, everything fades. The sounds diminish as if the signal is weakening, until the cabin falls completely silent once more. The silence that follows feels heavier than before. Sleep is difficult. Some guests report dreams filled with fragmented conversations and distorted sound. Others wake suddenly, convinced the radio static has returned, only to find the cabin quiet again. The feeling of being monitored never fully leaves, even in moments of calm. Stories surrounding old ranger cabins suggest a tragic past. Forest rangers once relied on radio communication as their lifeline. Storms, fires, and isolation made clear signals essential. It is believed that during a severe emergency long ago, a call for help went unanswered. Whether due to damaged equipment, weather interference, or distance, the transmission never reached its destination. According to belief, the cabin absorbed that moment. The walls, built to shelter and observe, became witnesses to urgency and silence. The radio calls, once sent with hope of response, became trapped within the space, replaying endlessly without resolution. The cabin does not understand time as people do. It remembers only the moment that mattered most. Natural explanations are offered. Old structures can carry sound in strange ways, especially in isolated environments. Electrical interference can occur without visible sources. The human brain, influenced by expectation and fear, can shape ambiguous noise into familiar patterns like voices. But those who hear the messages insist there is structure to them. The words repeat in the same order. The timing remains consistent. The urgency never escalates or fades beyond its set rhythm. It is not imagination creating chaos, but memory repeating itself with precision. By morning, old ranger cabin feels different. Sunlight filters through the trees, warming the wooden walls. The forest resumes its quiet motion. Birds return cautiously, and the air feels lighter. Inside the cabin, the static is gone. The walls are silent, offering no hint of the night before. Visitors step outside with relief, often pausing to look back at the structure. From the outside, it appears harmless. Just an old building tucked into the trees, slowly weathering away. There is no sign of what echoes within after dark. Yet those who leave carry the memory with them. The sound of voices reaching through static. The feeling of standing in a place where time refuses to move forward. The unsettling thought that somewhere, somehow, a call for help is still being sent, waiting for a response that will never come. Old Ranger Cabin remains where it has always stood, surrounded by forest and silence. Each night, when darkness returns and the world grows quiet, the past speaks again through invisible waves, replaying the same moment endlessly, hoping that one day, someone will finally answer. Dark Root Cabin stands at the edge of a dense forest, where tall trees press close and sunlight struggles to reach the ground. From the outside, the structure looks old but intact, built from thick logs and stone, as if meant to endure harsh seasons. The forest surrounds it in silence, leaves layered deep, roots hidden beneath soil that has not been disturbed for years. Thick tree roots break through the wooden floorboards, winding across the planks like veins. Some curve gently along the walls. Others rise sharply, splitting boards and forcing their way upward. They appear dry and solid, as though they have always been there, accepted as part of the cabin rather than intruders. Guests are warned about the roots before they arrive. They are told the forest has grown close over time, that the cabin settled, that nature reclaimed a little ground. In daylight, these explanations seem reasonable. The roots do not move. They rest where they are, silent and still, blending into the shadows along the floor. Night changes that understanding. As darkness settles, the cabin creaks softly. The sounds are subtle at first, easy to dismiss as wood cooling or wind moving through branches. But beneath those familiar noises is something slower, heavier. A sense of gradual movement that cannot be easily heard, but can be felt. By morning, the roots have shifted. Guests wake to find them closer than before. A root that once curved along the far wall now reaches toward the center of the room. Another presses against the leg of a chair, lifting it slightly off balance. The change is never dramatic. It is measured, careful, almost deliberate. No one hears them move. Each night brings the same result. The roots advance slowly, inch by inch, narrowing open space. Beds feel closer to the floor. Paths across the room become more difficult to navigate. Guests step carefully, aware that what was clear the night before may no longer be safe to cross. The air feels heavier. The room feels smaller. Roots cast long shadows in the dim light, their shapes unfamiliar and unsettling. Turning on a lamp reveals nothing in motion, yet the arrangement feels wrong, closer than memory allows. By morning, the evidence is clear. Roots lie nearer to the bed frames, some reaching toward blankets, others curling beside pillows. They never touch, never cross that final distance. The restraint unsettles guests more than contact would. Suggests intention, not growth driven by chance. Outside, the forest watches quietly. Trees stand tall and unmoving, their roots hidden beneath layers of earth and leaf. From the clearing, the cabin looks unchanged, a human structure holding its place against the wilderness. But inside, the forest is already present, spreading its reach one slow movement at a time. Guests who remain for several nights notice patterns. The roots never retreat. They only move forward. Their paths avoid obstacles, sliding around furniture rather than forcing through it. These efforts fail quietly. By morning, roots have shifted around barriers, sometimes lifting objects slightly, sometimes forcing them aside without leaving damage. The floorboards remain intact, as if cooperating with the movement. Sleep becomes difficult. Guests report dreams filled with forest sounds, deep earth shifting, and slow pressure beneath their feet. They wake feeling watched, though nothing in the room moves. The roots remain still, resting in their new positions, as though satisfied with the progress made. The forest air carries a presence even indoors. It smells faintly of soil and leaves, growing stronger with each passing night. The boundary between cabin and woods feels thinner, less certain. Walls seem less solid. Windows reflect trees more than interior light. Some guests leave early. They describe a growing sense that the cabin is no longer a shelter, but a space being reclaimed. The roots do not feel hostile. They feel patient. Their advance lacks urgency, which makes it more unsettling. The forest does not rush. It has time. Those who stay longer begin to accept the changes. They step carefully. They adjust their movements to accommodate the roots. The cabin becomes something else, less a building and more a shared space between human presence and natural will. Fear gives way to uneasy understanding. By the final night, the room feels transformed. Roots frame the bed like a boundary. The floor is a network of dark lines, each one alive with quiet purpose. The cabin creaks softly, not in distress, but in agreement. The forest has not broken the structure. It has joined it. Morning arrives gently. Sunlight filters through the trees. Birds return to the clearing. Inside, the roots rest where they last moved, closer than ever before. They do not advance in daylight. They wait. Locals speak of dark root cabin with careful respect. They say the forest here is old, older than the cabin and older than the idea of ownership. It allows structures to stand for a time, then reminds them who truly belongs. The roots are not destroying the cabin. They are absorbing it. Dark root cabin remains available to visitors. It still offers shelter from rain and cold. Its walls still stand. But each night, the forest reaches farther inside, reshaping the space without sound or force. Those who leave carry the memory with them. They remember waking to find the earth closer than before. They remember how quietly the roots moved, how deliberate the advance felt. And they understand that some places do not forget what was once theirs. The forest does not hurry. It waits. And in dark root cabin, it continues its slow return, one careful movement at a time, until walls, floors, and roots become part of the same living ground. Deadwood Crossing Cabin stands near the remains of an old trail that once carried steady foot traffic through the forest. The path is faint now, broken by roots and fallen branches, but it still cuts a clear line through the trees. By day, the cabin looks ordinary, weathered by time but intact, its porch facing the direction of the trail as if still expecting travelers to arrive. The quiet feels complete in daylight. Wind moves through deadwood and pine, and sunlight filters across the ground in scattered patterns. Nothing suggests activity. Nothing hints at urgency. Guests often comment on how still the place feels, as though it has been left behind by time. Night changes everything. The air cools quickly, and shadows thicken between the trees. The old trail disappears into blackness, no longer visible beyond a few steps from the porch. Lantern lights appear first. Soft points of yellow glow pass between the trees, moving steadily along the line of the old trail. They sway gently, rising and falling with a rhythm that suggests walking. The lights do not flicker wildly. They remain consistent, controlled, as though carried carefully by unseen hands. Guests often assume other hikers are nearby, perhaps lost or traveling late. Listening reveals something unsettling. There are no voices. No conversation. No sound of gear or clothing. Only the soft crunch of footsteps on forest ground, measured and deliberate. The lanterns pass again and again throughout the night, always moving in the same direction, as if repeating a journey with no destination. At irregular intervals, the footsteps stop at the cabin door. The sound is unmistakable. Boots come to rest just beyond the threshold. The weight shifts slightly, as if someone stands there considering whether to knock. There is no knock. The pause lingers, long enough to raise breath and tension. Guests often find themselves holding still, listening for the smallest change. The air feels dense, pressing inward. Then the footsteps move away. Those who gather the courage to open the door are met with nothing. The porch stands empty. The trail beyond is swallowed by darkness. No lantern light remains. No figure retreats. The forest offers no sign that anyone was ever there. This cycle repeats throughout the night. Some guests try to ignore the movement, retreating to inner rooms and blocking windows. Even then, the shifting light bleeds through cracks and seams, faint but persistent. Footsteps remain audible, passing by the cabin with patient regularity. Sleep becomes shallow. Dreams fill with walking, waiting, and paths that never end. Waking offers little clarity, as the lanterns continue outside, indifferent to observation. Local accounts suggest the trail once served as a vital crossing point. Travelers moved through it at all hours, guided by lantern light when daylight failed. Some never reached the other side. Storms, exhaustion, and misjudged distances claimed many who attempted the journey too late. Over time, the trail lost its purpose. New roads replaced it. The cabin remained, standing watch long after the last map marked the crossing. Those familiar with the area say the movement is not haunting in the way people expect. They do not approach with intent. The lanterns are believed to mark a route remembered rather than chosen. They simply walk. The pause at the door feels less like curiosity and more like habit, as if stopping there was once part of the journey. What unsettles guests most is the absence of interaction. The presence feels complete without acknowledgement. Opening the door breaks nothing. It reveals only how alone the observer truly is. As dawn approaches, the activity slows. Lanterns appear less frequently. Footsteps fade into longer silences. By the time light returns to the forest, the trail is empty once more. Morning reveals no footprints. No disturbed soil. No sign of passage. The cabin sits as it did the day before, quiet and still, facing a path that looks unused and forgotten. Guests often question what they witnessed. Some decide it was imagination shaped by darkness and isolation. Others feel certain the movement was real, guided by rules no longer understood. Those who stay multiple nights notice patterns. The lanterns never cross into the clearing. The footsteps never enter the cabin. The door is never touched. Whatever moves along the trail remains bound to it, unable or unwilling to step beyond. Deadwood Crossing Cabin continues to stand at the edge of that boundary. It serves as a witness rather than a participant, observing a journey that repeats itself endlessly after dark. Visitors who leave often carry the memory of lantern light sliding past the windows, of footsteps pausing just outside, of doors opening to nothing but night. But when darkness returns, the path remembers. It brings movement without destination, light without warmth, and travelers who pass by forever, never knocking, never entering, and never truly leaving the old trail behind. Shadow Lake Cabin stands at the edge of still water where the forest opens just enough to let the shoreline breathe. Tall trees lean inward, their reflections stretching across the Lakia's surface like dark threads. By day, the water looks calm and undisturbed, a smooth mirror that reflects sky and branches with near-perfect clarity. The cabin itself feels ordinary, built for quiet stays and long views across the lake. Yet even in daylight, something feels off. The lake reflects more than it should. Guests notice it first in passing moments. A glance toward the water reveals movement that does not match the shore. A shape where none stands. A suggestion of depth behind the reflection that feels too layered to ignore. When they look again, the surface appears normal, holding only trees and clouds. Light behaves strangely near water. Reflections distort easily. Fatigue plays tricks on the eyes. These explanations satisfy the mind, at least until night arrives and the lake begins to change. As evening settles, the surface darkens into a smooth, glass-like plane. Moonlight stretches across it in pale bands, steady and unbroken. The forest grows quiet. Sound seems to fall inward, drawn toward the lake rather than carried away. This is when the reflections shift. Guests standing near the shore see figures in the water that are not present behind them. Human shapes, upright and still, appearing just beyond their own reflected outlines. They look solid in the lake, as real as the viewer's own image. Yet when guests turn around, the shore behind them is empty. The figures do not move. They stand ankle-deep in reflected water, their forms clear but lacking detail. Faces are indistinct, yet unmistakably facing forward. Others wave a hand, watching carefully as their own reflection moves while the figures behind do not. The separation becomes impossible to ignore. The most unsettling detail comes slowly. Some reflections smile. It is not a wide expression. Not exaggerated. Just a subtle curve that appears where no face should be visible. Those who stare too long begin to feel the effects. Dizziness sets in quietly. The world tilts slightly, as if balance has shifted by a few degrees. Muscles weaken. Breathing feels heavier than it should. The lake seems to draw attention inward, narrowing focus until everything else fades into the background. People describe a strong urge to keep looking. Even as discomfort grows, the reflection holds their gaze. Thoughts slow. The forest around them feels distant and unreal. Some report hearing faint sounds, like water lapping closer than it is, or footsteps that never reach the shore. Those who break eye contact often stumble backward. The moment they look away, strength returns slowly, unevenly. The lake resumes its quiet stillness. Reflections normalize, showing only trees and moonlight. The figures vanish as if they were never there. Guests who experience this once are warned by others. Do not stare. Do not test it. Look away immediately. Most follow this advice. A few do not. Some return to the shore night after night, compelled by curiosity or the belief that understanding will bring control. These guests often leave early, pale and exhausted, complaining of headaches and lingering weakness. A small number require assistance walking away from the lake, their legs trembling as though they have stood too long in cold water. Sleep at Shadow Lake Cabin becomes restless. Dreams fill with images of water and mirrored movement. People wake unsure which way they were facing, with the sense that someone stood nearby moments before. Then fade when lights are switched on. About the lake. And to keep a respectful distance after dark. But they do not invite discussion. Their familiarity with the pattern shows in the way they redirect conversations. Locals share quieter explanations. Some believe the lake holds impressions rather than reflections, echoes of presence layered into the water itself. Others say the surface does not lie, but it does not show the same moment as the shore. According to them, the lake reflects something slightly behind time, or slightly beside it. Animals avoid the water at night. Deer paths end before reaching the shore. Birds roost farther back in the trees. Even insects thin out near the edge, leaving the lake wrapped in unnatural stillness. The water remains smooth, unbroken by ripples, as if waiting. By morning, the lake appears harmless again. Sunlight scatters reflections into harmless fragments. Guests who arrive during the day see only a peaceful scene. Unaware of what the surface will show after dark. Stories told in daylight sound exaggerated, stripped of the weight they carry at night. Yet as the sun lowers and shadows stretch across the water, the mirror begins to sharpen. Those who stay learn quickly to treat the lake with caution. To glance rather than stare. To trust their bodies when weakness begins. To remember that not every reflection is meant to be studied. Shadow Lake Cabin remains quiet and welcoming, perched beside water that holds more than light. At night, the surface waits, patient and smooth, ready to show figures that do not stand on shore. And those who linger too long learn a simple truth. Some reflections are not meant to be recognized. They are meant to be avoided. Last Timber Cabin stands at the edge of a clearing where the forest thins and the trees begin to space themselves apart. The land here feels undecided, not fully claimed by wilderness and not fully released into open ground. Wind moves differently in this place, slowing as it reaches the cabin, as if the air itself hesitates before passing through. By day, the cabin appears ordinary. Weathered logs, a narrow porch, windows that reflect the tree lean like dull mirrors. The path leading to it fades quickly behind, swallowed by grass and shadow. Stepping inside marks the first change. Visitors often remark on how quiet it feels, even when birds move through the branches and leaves shift overhead. Sound seems to arrive late, softened, as though filtered through distance that does not exist. The air grows still. Not stale, but settled, like water in a bowl that has stopped rippling. Footsteps sound heavier, slower, each movement leaving a faint impression that lingers longer than expected. The cabin holds warmth without effort, yet there is no sense of heat or cold. Something more subtle overshadows temperature. Time begins to loosen. Guests often notice it while unpacking or setting down supplies. Tasks feel unhurried. A glance out the window suggests afternoon, yet the light remains unchanged when they look again. Watches are checked casually, then checked again. Minutes seem to stack unevenly, some passing instantly, others refusing to move at all. Clocks do not function here. Mechanical clocks tick briefly, then stall. Digital displays freeze mid-minute or reset without warning. Phone screens dim and wake at odd intervals, their internal clocks drifting out of alignment with the outside world. Batteries are full. Signals are strong. Nothing explains the behavior. At first, it feels like an inconvenience. The cabin encourages rest, and the absence of schedules feels freeing. Guests sit longer than intended. Meals stretch without hunger. Conversation drifts into silence and back again without awkwardness. Sleep arrives gently, without the usual cues of fatigue. Night falls quietly. There is no sudden darkness. Light recedes in gradual layers, as if being folded away rather than extinguished. Inside, lamps cast steady glows that do not flicker. Outside, the forest holds its shape, unmoving and watchful. Sleep inside Last Timber Cabin is deep and uninterrupted. Dreams are rare. When they do occur, they are simple and calm. Waking feels smooth, without the jolt of morning. Guests open their eyes unsure how long they have been resting. Bodies feel restored, yet the mind searches for markers that are not there. Morning does not announce itself clearly. Light through the windows looks familiar but offers no clues. Is it early? Is it late? The cabin provides no answers. Clocks remain silent. Phones disagree with one another. Hunger comes and goes without pattern. Some guests step outside to regain perspective. The clearing appears unchanged. Shadows fall where they should, yet the sun seems oddly distant, its position difficult to judge. The forest beyond the thinning trees feels farther away than before, as though space itself has stretched. Those who decide to leave often do so casually, believing they have stayed a single night, perhaps two. The walk back to the road feels longer, but not difficult. The world beyond the trees resumes its normal rhythm abruptly. Only then does confusion begin. Phones reconnect fully. Messages arrive in clusters. Missed calls stack one after another. Dates on notifications do not match memory. Guests insist this cannot be correct. They remember arriving in the afternoon. They remember one evening. One night of rest. They remember no missing memories, no blank spaces, only a seamless sense of time that does not align with evidence. Records confirm the longer stay. Logs show the cabin occupied. Supplies consumed match multiple days. Weather reports indicate shifts guests do not recall experiencing. The forest remembers more time than those who passed through it. Local accounts treat this calmly. Last timber cabin, they say, sits where time thins just as the forest does. Not broken. Not stopped. Simply spread wider. Moments take longer to pass through. Hours lose urgency. Days soften until they overlap. The cabin does not trap anyone. Those who wish to leave can do so at any moment. There are no barriers, no confusion of direction. The slowing is gentle, permissive. It offers stillness, not confinement. Some believe the land remembers the final years of logging, when the forest retreated slowly and deliberately. Trees fell. Space opened. Time stretched as people waited, worked, and moved on. The cabin, built during that transition, absorbed the pace of a place learning to let go. Guests who return often experience the effect more quickly. Time loosens within minutes. Clocks fail almost immediately. The body relaxes into the rhythm without resistance. These visitors rarely stay long, not because of fear, but because the outside world feels too loud afterward. The cabin remains unchanged. No new marks appear. No signs warn visitors of what to expect. The space within the cabin holds steady. Those who leave last timber cabin carry the sensation with them. In busy places, they notice moments stretching unexpectedly. In silence, they feel time soften at the edges. The memory of the cabin surfaces during long waits and quiet evenings, reminding them of a place where urgency dissolved. Last timber cabin does not steal time. It returns it differently, reshaped, unhurried, and unresolved. And for those who step inside, even briefly, the world beyond the thinning forest never quite moves at the same speed again. Thank you for wandering with me through the haunted forest cabins of Montana tonight. These woods are ancient, silent, and watchful. They have seen countless travelers come and go, and some who never left at all. Cabins offer shelter, but in these forests, walls do not always keep things out. If you ever find yourself alone beneath towering pines, listening to the wind move through the branches, remember these stories. Not every knock should be answered. Not every voice should be followed. Would you dare spend a night alone in one of these haunted cabins, or would you choose to stay where the forest cannot reach you? Rest well, my friend. Until our next journey into the shadows.